Hello and welcome to the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, where we discuss self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe. I'm your host, Nia Thomas, and join me as I talk to today's guest. I'm joined by Gerardo Segat today, who is an international leadership coach whose purpose and legacy is to humanise leadership. Following a wealth of experiences as an entrepreneur, a chair, and a CEO, Gerardo has used his leadership background to create Preludes, which is a coaching program created to humanize leaders, organizations, and their stakeholders through creative and powerful organizational experiences. Gerardo is also the creator of The Debate, which is a formal and format of decision-making debate. He also created Leader in the Mirror, which is a format of interview, and Leaderness, which is a postgraduate training program. Lots of different titles there. And just before we came on air, Gerardo were telling me that creating names for his program is something that he really enjoys doing. For the past decade, he has been a member of YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, and it's the world's largest community of leaders and CEOs. He's the founder of 3 of these chapters in Italy, Switzerland, and globally. Currently, Gerardo is working on Out as Humans, which is a performing arts show designed to humanize authentic leaders. Wow, Gerardo, it's lovely to have you here.
Hi, Nia. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So tell us about your journey from being an entrepreneur and a CEO to becoming an international leadership coach. Tell us all about that journey.
Well, I'm going to start a little bit just when I was kind of younger, because I think that has impacted whatever has happened. I am one of those guys who has chosen a direction that did not belong necessarily to me because of life events. My dad died when I was 6, and then my mother got ill when I was 13. Myself and my brother and my sister, we had to kind of handle everything in the house, even finances at the age of 13. And then my mom died when I was 15.
Wow.
And so I was left, without parents, very little money. And I, kind of, because of that, because of these kind of traumatic events in life, then I built this desire of becoming a successful person. Okay. And specifically a successful entrepreneur, because my dad was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
So I kind of had this in my blood. So at that time, the first need was to really earn the money to pay for my education. So I started organizing parties in clubs in Milan. I lived in Milan in Italy. And with the money I earned, I paid for my education.
Okay.
And so during my university, I spent a year in Paris. I kind of fell in love with international tax. So I decided to go that direction. And I moved to London and started working for an international law firm. And at the age of 29, then I started my own small practice in a small service office in New Oxford Street in London, myself and a secretary. And that then, gradually became a multi-family office with 400 people, 10 offices around the world.
Wow.
Providing not only international tax, but asset management, etc., legal services, so on. But to me, success means, well, at that time meant external success. I mean, big size, building a big group, a lot of people, lots of offices, money, all of that, because this is the kind of message that I was getting, not from my parents, unfortunately, but, from television, from people, from school, from anywhere, And yeah, so when I actually reached that, I kind of asked myself, okay, but, nice, thank you very much, but I was missing something, and And not only what's next, no, but also, I don't know, I just felt empty a little bit,
Okay.
you know,
Hmm.
meaningless. And so I exited in 2016, I exited my business and requalified as a coach. When I exited my business, I didn't actually know what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to change. And so I requalified as a coach. And since 2016, I've been working as an international leadership coach for the purpose of humanizing. I knew I wanted to have more humanity in my professional life. And so this is where I decided to go. I spent, the last decade in this beautiful community of YPO, that is the world's largest community of CEO, 35,000 members in 140 countries. And the rest, from my bio that you just read, certainly one of the things that I like is learning by creating. So I created all these different things that you mentioned before.
Wow, what a journey from very traumatic a beginning as a child to quite successful in your adult life. That is quite a journey. And listeners may already be aware that my background is in the public sector, in the charitable sector, particularly working with children and families, and having experience of children who have traumatic childhoods and how they then live their lives as young people and adults. That is something quite remarkable to hear that you made that transition. So, wow, that's really impressive to hear. Tell us about humanizing. What does that mean?
So when I say humanizing leadership, what I mean is that any leader, okay, I want to make sure that any leader who walks out of the door of his house brings his human being or her human being with them, okay, and doesn't forget it at home in bed, okay. That's because I see that often leaders are confronted with fears, and the way that this is somehow handled is, I'm going to leave the human being with fears at home, and I'm going to be a leader outside, wear a mask, a nice mask, and go out in the world and be a leader and fill the world with some kind of harmful defensive behavior, screaming, shouting, ignoring, blaming, postponing, judging, whatever, you mentioned as a reaction of those fears. So the work that for me, humanizing leadership means keeping the leader being inside, connected with the human being, so that decisions are humanized, so that interactions are humanized, so that, everything is humanized. Everything that the leaders does is humanizing, and therefore organizations are humanized.
Interesting. A couple of my podcast guests have talked about this idea, and more recently, I spoke to Lynn Turner, who gave an example of the National Health Service and how it's changed from command and control, and we are seeing more humanization within the leadership programs. And she talked about how, as you move up the career ladder, we dehumanize language. Instead of talking about people and patients, we talk about numbers and throughput. Have you seen a change over the time that you've been working as an entrepreneur and with other stakeholders to now being a coach, that there has been an evidential shift towards more care, more authenticity, more humanization? Is that something you're already starting to see?
Well, I can answer that question bringing my experience as a coach and my experience as a member of YPO.
Hmm.
Okay, so as a member of the largest community of CEO in the world, okay. So in my professional experience, I have seen deep authenticity and human connection. One of the experiences of my coaching program is a speech that I gave to board of directors about vulnerability.
Hmm.
And during this speech, half an hour, I, just share information about that. And half an hour, I actually share my most intimate fragility. and I ask people to share theirs. And surprisingly, just after half an hour, people share incredible traumas, incredible situations, like disorders that they have, sexual violence, things like this. And many times it ends up people crying, people
Yeah.
crying, hugging each other. So this is a message I want to give. It seems one of the most difficult things to do. The reality is it can be also one of the easiest things to do. And that's because people crave to find themselves into a situation where they can open up. People, anyone at any level, they just crave to find themselves into those scenarios where they can open up. And, yes, they might be blocked by fears. And yes, people might have different attitudes. From some people might be easier, for other people might be more difficult. But it doesn't matter. Because people crave, it means that once you start it, then it is very much contagious. So if you lead by example and you are vulnerable, you are human, then people around you will be the same. That's my experience. As a member of YPO, I can tell you this, YPO, 35,000 CEOs, 140 countries. Question, what is the service, whatever you find in YPO, the first reason for membership in YPO? And the answer is what they call forum. Forum is a format of monthly meeting where 6, 7, 8, 9, from 6 to 10 CEO meet on a regular basis, and they share updates about their personal and professional life, where they share emotions. They share, their vulnerability. They ask help. They cry. They do all these things. Okay, that's the number one reason for membership in the world's largest community of CEOs. So that is where the world is going.
I was just thinking that during COVID, that really prevented that connection, but the digital explosion also created different kind of connections where people could set up those 6 to 8 people together right around the globe. You didn't necessarily have to worry about, can I find 6 or 7 people near me to have those kind of relationships? It opened up a whole new avenue of creating a forum, I guess. Is that something that you were part of, that digital explosion to create that connection?
Yes, absolutely. And I was not reluctant, no, but I know I had a little bit of resistance. I
Hmm.
said, I was convinced that the digital way wouldn't be necessarily warm, wouldn't be necessarily profound, wouldn't be necessarily incisive. But the reality is it's exactly the same thing. Two people connect, two, three, four, five people, 10, 100 people connect. It's not the tool that you use, but it's what you say, how you move, or what it's something else that really can make people connect.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you. So tell us, you've mentioned a little bit about some programs that you've developed. You've talked about Prelude and organization events like Be Extraordinary Individuals and Out as Humans. But how do all of these things really influence humanization within that leadership that you're looking for?
Okay, I started creating this program after I, kind of did an exercise myself, and then started, doing the same exercise, proposing the same exercise to clients and people around my network. And the exercise is I actually looked at my harmful behaviors,
Mhm.
this shouting, ignoring, wearing mask, blaming, etc. And I started asking myself, okay, why this behavior? Okay. And obviously I came to fears, but even when I came to fears, I wanted to get to the ultimate fears. okay, the ultimate cause of this behavior. So I continue to ask myself, why? And I've ended up with four ultimate fears. So
Okay.
those four ultimate fears that then are the cause of those behaviors and those intermediate fears, if you want. So those fears, those four ultimate fears are fear of no meaning. So no meaning in what you do
Hmm.
or who you are. Fear of loneliness. So fear of feeling lonely or ending up alone in the future. Fear of dependency from something or somebody,
Hmm.
and fear of uncertainty.
Okay.
So those four fears seem somehow determine cause all the different behaviors. Okay.
So
So
let me recap those. So it was fear of no meaning, loneliness, dependence, and the fourth was
uncertainty.
uncertainty. The two in the middle feel very connected, and it almost feels like in, unless you find the midpoint between those two, it's almost like a spectrum from one end to the other.
Well, yes, the reality, I mean, is interesting what you say. I mean, there are some differences. I mean, dependence doesn't necessarily mean from somebody, it can be also from something.
Okay,
Okay.
yes.
Whatever it is, I don't want to get into, dependence from some kind of disorders like, drugs or whatever, but it can be dependence from a gesture, dependence from anything
Okay,
somehow. Okay.
okay.
But I also, to be honest, I even think that not only the two of them have interrelations, but the four of them
Hmm.
have interrelations. Anyway, those I happen to see that also doing this exercise with other people, those are the recurring fears of a leader. Okay.
Mm.
So what I did, I said, okay, let's simply flip them. Okay, and to find what I call the inner treasures of a leader. Okay,
Oh, okay.
so flipping no meaning, you flip it into meaning. Let's
Yep.
flip it into a positive,
Okay.
So I came to meaning, love, freedom, and certainty. Okay,
Oh, I see. Okay.
so inner love, inner freedom, inner meaning, and inner certainty.
Right.
Those to me are the four inner treasures of a leader. Okay. And when you get to that, which you will never get because it's a continuous, but
Yep. Yep.
at least when you start chasing them, when you start looking for them, when those you set those as objectives, you start feeling less fearful.
Yeah. I can see that.
So less harmful behaviors, and so more authentic, less need of masks, more open, more cohesion, more trust, more humanized. Okay. So what preludes, going back to your question, how the coaching program, the show, whatever I've created, how does it impact humanize? It impacts in that way. So it tends to make it invites people to go inner,
Hmm.
look look for those four treasures, and therefore gradually release those fears, get rid of those fears and feel free to be who they truly are.
Which leads us very nicely into a conversation about self-awareness, because for me, all of those things that you have described, without self-awareness, you can't work out what those things are for you. So, what
No.
does self-awareness mean for you? If you had to define it or describe it, how would you do that?
Watch your movie at the cinema.
Okay.
So this is how I would describe it. So think about when you go and watch a movie in a cinema, you forget your phones and everything else is kind of dark around, and you see the screen, and the way that you look and live and are into the movie you are emotionally kind of involved, but you look, there is a distance, there is observation, there is, whilst you watch, there is very little judgment, there is no intervention. To me, this is self-awareness, is it looking at you like if you were watching a movie in a cinema.
Oh, I like that. Nobody has explained it in that way, but you're right. The way you describe that very focused focus. And listeners, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any other podcast player, you won't see us doing the hand gestures. But if you nip over to YouTube, you'll probably see us doing it. It's about the focus, isn't it? That little screen that's in front of you, and you can almost blank out everything else so that you have that focus and are able to concentrate. I like that idea. You talk about self-awareness being the strongest skill of a leader. Why do you say it's the strongest skill? Because you've already talked to us about four other things that leaders need to really focus on, but why is self-awareness the strongest skill?
Well, I think having said that, those are the four inner treasures correctly, as you said, the starting point is self-awareness. You can't even start to look for this if there's no self-awareness. It's consciousness, knowledge, awareness of yourself. Maybe not necessarily strongest. I think it is the most important skill. And if I look at the future, it is definitely the most important skill from my point of view.
Okay.
The most important leadership skills. And I'm going to tell you a little thing here, a little funny thing, but somehow I think it's nice. Recently a friend of mine asked ChatGPT what would be the kind of intelligences, human intelligences, for that would be least likely for AI to surpass humans.
Okay. Yeah.
And he asked that to ChatGPT. Okay. So the answer from ChatGPT was 5 intelligences. Okay. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence,
Okay.
naturalistic intelligence, existential intelligence,
Mm,
interpersonal intelligence,
mm.
and intrapersonal intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, in the definition, 2 or 3 lines, ChatGPT also provided the definition of those 5. In the definition, there is always the word awareness or consciousness.
Right.
Okay, so it is bodily kinesthetic intelligence is awareness of your body, awareness of nature, naturalistic intelligence, awareness of your reason to exist. Why do I exist? So, your why, your values, your identity, awareness of others, interpersonal, and intrapersonal is the definition of self-awareness. So awareness of your thoughts, of your skills, of whatever is white and black inside yourself. And so that's, even not me, it's ChatGPT saying awareness is the leadership skill of the future.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to hear it. Tell us about your thoughts on strategic level leaders. So it's something that I often ask my guests about, whether they have observed that there is a link or not between self-awareness and people who are at the very top of organizations. In your experience, again, as an entrepreneur and as a coach, what are you experiencing out there?
Well, I think that there isn't sufficient self-awareness on top. That's my experience. And that is, you know, instead, it is very important because of that contagious aspect of humanity. And, for me, self-awareness is a human skill.
Mhm.
And therefore, also self-awareness is very much contagious. I think it will be very crucial that um, leaders build self-awareness. And it will be very crucial because then there will be a ripple effect in the organizations and in the communities. I think that is happening somehow because the more we grow up in the leadership scale, the more leaders are at the top, the more they forget that they are also followers.
Okay.
And that somehow has an effect, because what I see often, for example, is that the humanity that leaders show downwards is much higher than the humanity they show upwards.
Okay.
Okay, so, and I give you an example. You probably heard of this beautiful sentence that hangs around the world, which is use business as a force for good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of leaders, lots of people I know, really have this like a big tattoo,
Okay.
in their head. Use business as a force for good, which is a good thing. But, when things like big conventions happen around the world, like World Economic Forum, COP, whatever, there is often this comment, what is this guy deciding? There is no empathy, there is no tolerance, there is not so much signs of humanity in
Uh-huh.
the way that this leader look at leaders above
Right.
them. Okay. And for me, this is because they forget that they're also followers. The more they grow, the more they're leaders, and the more this makes them forget they're also followers. And that somehow, what they ask, or what they try to not ask, but what they're trying to teach, what they're trying to, downwards, and then that somehow they don't give upwards.
Okay. There is something about humility there from what you've said. There is something about accepting that you can learn from others, that you can grow from others, and that every leader has a boss, and everybody at the top of the organization has somebody else to follow. And I guess it's that cycle of you give out and you get back. That, yeah, interesting thoughts.
I think that if we want big change in the world, bottom-up humanity
Yeah,
is essential,
yeah.
you know, is essential until we put people who are above us and judge them, we have little chance of big change.
You've talked a bit about followers there. Tell me about your thoughts on leaders and followers. And we often talk about leaders, but we don't talk very much about followers as such. What are your thoughts?
It's true that we use, comment, look, dig into the word leaders, but follower is a very important word.
Hmm.
But the people I normally deal with and that are around me tend to forget. I think that if we felt much more follower, we probably had more chances to bring out our, say, human skills, humanity. And yeah, I think it's a kind of a natural thing somehow when you grow and you have those responsibility that you more look downwards rather than look upwards. And also, dedicate time, attention, learning, and development of us as followers.
Interesting that you've said that. That it's a phrase I often use is that as leaders, we look up and out, and as managers, we look down and in. But when you said the word look up, I've not thought of it in that context, and I might think of it more broadly in the future, that actually when we're looking up and out, it's 360 degrees, maybe rather than that upwards direction, that there's up and out that you can think about quite differently. That's interesting.
It has to do also with comfort.
Mm,
I mean, if we are leaders, to look downwards is more comfortable.
yeah.
To look upwards, it's more foggy, there's more uncertainty, there's more, so, it's easier. Sometimes even things like use business as a force for good is in reality a comfort zone where we like to end up to, because there we know we can do, there we know we can, we know how, what, why, and instead, if we get out of it and put the hat of the follower and try to do something up the line, then it's more foggy. Then we don't know how, we don't know what, we don't know if, we don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Earlier on, you mentioned Out as Humans, which is a performing arts show. Tell me more about that. How does that fit into leadership and creating more humanization within leadership?
Well, it actually is a powerful experience. It's like a shot of psychological safety
Okay.
given to leaders. Okay. It's not, it's, of what I was talking before about forum.
Hmm.
That is, forum is like a monthly meeting you get regular and so on. Out as Humans is 1.5 hour powerful shot of psychological safety, of vulnerability, of opening up. It's a show that combines powerful questioning, so let's say coaching questioning, with performing arts and storytelling.
Okay.
Around 10 words that express intimate humanity of people. So things like heart, soul, hug, fragility, death, these kind of words.
Okay.
And around those words, so there is a question, there is a performing art, and there is some storytelling. And there are some moments of interaction during the show where people share fragilities, they write apology notes to each other. This is the kind of experience. And the idea is really to allow leaders to open up, be vulnerable, take off their mask, and experience what it gives them, what it means.
So is this something that leaders come to, or do leaders play the parts? Or
It,
how does it work?
it is something, it's a private show that gets
Okay.
featured in corporates. So for
Ah, okay.
corporations, organizations, the leadership organizations, association conventions, this is
Okay.
how it's a private show. There's not a public calendar, so it
Okay.
doesn't, it gets featured as a private show for corporates, organization, conventions, etc.
Oh, how interesting. So if there's anybody listening who wanted to have that show provided to their leadership team, how would they go about getting in touch with you?
Just visit my website,
Okay.
gerardosegat.com, and there you find all information and contacts, the way to contact me, etc.
Brilliant listeners and watchers. As you know, the link will be in the show notes for you to connect with Gerardo if you want to. So, how might leaders or budding leaders even develop their self awareness based on your ideas around humanization and leadership?
Well, I think I would kind of start from developing awareness,
Okay.
which might be easier than developing self-awareness. I mean, developing awareness means awareness of something that is not ourselves, but is external, something, what we see, what we touch, what we feel, what we smell. That might be, a way to start developing those kind of awareness skill. And the second way, I think, is setting yourself inner objectives and emotional goals.
Mm.
So inner objectives, say, inner meaning, for example. So when you set yourself inner objective, then you somehow are checking in with yourself, and you need to create and build self-awareness. And when I say emotional goals is, for example, most of the people that go to a meeting, most of the times have factual objectives. So I want to get out of that meeting with a contract signed,
Yeah.
with a yes from somebody, with, but very rarely they add emotional objectives. So how would I like to feel at the end of that meeting.
Mm.
Okay, so if you start adding those emotional objectives, you see that it's like your view widens up, and you may do something different in the meeting, or you may do something different in preparation for the meeting. So that's a second way. A third way, I think, awareness. You can't know yourself. You can't be conscious of yourself. You can't be aware if you are not connected with your human being. People tend to forget this. So a third way is to cultivate connection with your inner human being.
Mm.
Whatever it is, a book, a movie, even putting together, some words, the words that I mentioned before, soul, fragility, apology, goosebumps, whatever you want, whatever feelings we have, if every day we have one word that we think about, even for 3 minutes, that will make us cultivate that connection, so that make sure that the inner being, the human being that we have, is with us all the time, wherever we go.
Oh, I really like that. That's something I've not thought about before. I think it links very well with journaling. So if there's anybody out there that's interested in journaling, picking a word that means something to you and really exploring it and exploring your thoughts around it. That's really, really interesting. It's been a really good conversation. There's been lots of food for thought. And listeners, I think lots of things that Gerardo has said, you might want to go to the transcript so that you can read that back. You may want to make notes on it and do some action planning around that, because I think there are lots of ways that you can really dip into the human that maybe you moved a little bit too far away from, to help you get back to that self-awareness, to really find your authentic self. Gerardo, it's been really interesting having a conversation with you. Thank you so much. We will indeed make sure that there are links in the show notes for listeners and watchers. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to leave a rate and review on your favourite podcast platform, because a little word from you means a big deal to me. You can also sign up for my newsletter on my website, knowingselfknowingothers.co.uk. Join me next week when we discuss self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe to generate kinder, more respectful and creative working relationships through reflection, recognition and regulation. Looking forward to having you on my learning journey.